There are three types of engagements with financial advisors. And generally, what I've found is these personalities fall into three categories. One is the thought partner. The second is I'm good, but I got a question. And the third is this a scam? Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through today what each three of these personalities, and then we're going to walk through what are some action items depending on which category you may fall into. I'm Derrick Alexander with Greater Works Wealth, and we specialize in intergenerational planning. Usually, where we're connecting the first generation to the second generation with a financial plan. Um, and hopping straight into it, let's speak about the first character, the thought partner. Usually, this individual actually has a good amount of investable assets that are already put away. They probably have high income, and generally, they know and value expertise. So, what they're hoping to do is to add somebody from the outside who can help organize and maybe cover their blind spots for their financial picture. And that's usually through an ongoing engagement. There's usually some financial planning that's involved in that. But this individual is the value in having an ongoing partnership with somebody who is doing this day in and day out. The second of these categories, which is I'm good, but I got a question, is usually somebody who could be in a similar situation. They could be making a good amount of income. They could be someone that's usually on the cusp of maybe an exit or coming into some wealth, but maybe there's not a lot of experience working with a professional in regards to money, or maybe they weren't raised in an environment where that was common. So there's just a little bit more skepticism around opening up their financial picture and speaking to someone. So for this individual, it's usually a little bit more of a hesitant conversation, but what they're really looking is to kind of get their answers, or excuse me, get their questions answered, and in the end, they usually end up evolving into the thought partnership. It's just in the front end, this is their first exposure to maybe working with a professional. So it may take some time to answer those questions. Now we'll talk about our third category, which is this a scam? And usually 9 times out of 10, this is somebody that's probably either experienced somebody who's done something that was questionable regarding like financial guidance, or it's someone who has heard or read or watched a video on, characters in the industry doing something shady. And here's the way I like to park this tranche or group of people is usually if they are somebody who has some wealth or maybe be doing well, they're going to piece together their recommendations from online surface forums or their peers around them, and that's what's going to be their context for recommendations on what they're going to do until they come into some wealth. Usually you can make it off of those recommendations and what you find online until you run into a windfall of $1 million or 500,000 to, whatever the amount is that makes it feel uncomfortable to move forward with these recommendations online. That's usually when they're going to reach out and speak to a professional. And there's usually going to be a hypersensitivity to fees, and things of that nature just because of what they've heard and exposed themselves to. But as they continue on in crafting a relationship or finding someone they can trust, again, there's somebody who will eventually climb up that relationship tree to thought partnership. But I think the commonality between all three of these categories is everybody's pretty much looking for a couple of things when it comes to their financial picture. One is organization. Two is productivity. Three is proactiveness. A lot of times we don't want to be sitting on the sideline. We want somebody who can be thinking ahead about our situation and maybe getting ahead of what could be coming and mistakes that we could potentially avoid. Usually we're looking for accountability, some form of education. And then lastly, what I like to say is objectivity. So who's somebody that, if I'm watching MSNBC and they're saying the stock market is going to hell in a handbasket, who's somebody that can tell me if that's noise, if that's correct or not, right? And then lastly, which is the highest of kind of like the evolution of these personalities is partnership. So if you're somebody who's on like those three of those spectrums, what I encourage you to do is to engage with somebody who may be a professional in that industry, whether it be just going to coffee or scheduling a complimentary call, just to figure out. It's really about person to person. It's really about relationship. So if you can find the right person for you, then it'll help advance the ball in your financial picture. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. We'll have our information in the link below.